Welcome to Library Out Loud, a conversation about any and all things related to the Spokane County Library District. Library Out Loud is brought to you by the Spokane County Library District and our friends at STCU. Now, here's your host, Jane Baker.
Hello and welcome to Library Out Loud. I'm Jane Baker with the Spokane County Library District, and joining me on the program today is Timothy Ely. Hello, Timothy.
Hello.
How are you today?
I'm good.
Thanks for being here.
Delightful.
I'm so excited about this conversation. Now, we were just talking about what we're going to call you, and I'm going to describe you right now as an artist and bookbinder. But hopefully our conversation will explain that more to the listeners today and see what exciting things you do. I'm not even sure where to start. There's so many questions I want to ask you, and you have so many beautiful things here in front of us. But maybe for those of you who aren't familiar with you and your work, why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself? Who are you?
Who are I? Well, I was once a kid who discovered a science fiction book when I was about 7, and in this book were flying labs, spies, secret codes, alien messages, a whole pile of things that I think of now as sort of imagination activators, and it just kind of turned my brain to cheese and turned me into a reader. A little bit later turned me into a book collector, and I was always drawing. I was always interested in art, in the making of things. And so as I began to chase these things down, books started to play a role because they were teachers, they were information devices, they were places where I could carry drawings in sketchbooks or secret them into textbooks. I often got into a lot of trouble for drawing when I was supposed to be doing something else.
Sure.
But the book as an idea, the book as a force, the book as a thing that was pretty common, was a really powerful motivation tool. And growing up in the 50s, there was plenty of atomic war hysteria. Flying saucers were the rage. And so there was a lot of strange, brand new technologies, social responses to these technologies. And I was just in the right spot to watch adults go crazy. And so that was pretty formative.
Yes, and before the program began, and it's kind of not fair to the listeners, so I want to clue them in a little bit. You were telling me a little bit about a story of your grade school teacher, preschool teacher, or kindergarten, who is also the town librarian.
Right.
And she helped expose you to the books and the magazines in a...
Oh, yeah, Mrs. Trapp was tremendous. I would go to the library after school for several hours, and usually the shape of our conversation would be I'd walk in and tell her I needed something to read, and she would take me to a shelf and say, how's pirates, how's auto mechanics, how's this, and that would be good. So I would be kind of ditched at this shelf, and I'd dig around and find a book, and I'd check that out and take it home, or take out a pile of them, and so she was quite extraordinary that way. In about the 6th grade, I took a book that I checked out from the library to school, and it was a science fiction paperback. It had a bit of a racy cover, and my reading teacher just went crazy. And the parents were called, the library was called, and a friend and I were both sort of simultaneously busted and banned from the science fiction section.
Oh, no.
For years.
Oh,
and
no.
it was never rescinded. And exactly 50 years later, he and I happened to be in our hometown at the same time. So we went to the library and talked to whoever's behind the front desk and asked if it was now okay for us as, men over 60 to go into the sci-fi section. And we found things there that we decided if we'd had those when we were 12, we'd probably be in reform school. It was great.
What a great story. So you were allowed back into the section finally.
Well, but what it did, it turned me into a collector, because since I couldn't check them out, and I had an allowance of about a couple dollars a week, sci-fi paperbacks were 35 cents. So I started buying, and I imagined that my secret library was secret, but of course everybody knew where it was. But I discovered that I really liked owning books, that I could buy, by owning them, I could read them multiple times, and it was good.
Oh, that's great
So
stories.
I'm still collecting
They're
books.
great stories. Those are good things to collect. You are one of our creators in residence. We have an area inside the North Spokane Library called The Lab. It's a cool, exciting space. And then this fall, September through January, we have a different artist who has a different a medium, I guess I should say, each month, and you are featured in October.
I am October.
You are October. So every Wednesday at the Lab at North Spokane through October from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m., you will be there, and you'll be working on something, but it's a free-form thing where people can come in and watch what you're doing, can ask you questions, perhaps even get their hands on themselves. Can you tell me more about what it would be like if I came up to see you on a Wednesday?
Well, I have two ideas that are floating right now. One is the most basic, which is I will take a book, something like this, in and sew it several times, because it's very easy at this stage to sew it up, talk about the fundamentals of bookbinding, take it apart, do it again. So that'll happen multiple times.
Very cool.
And I'll see how far I can push that, depending on how much stuff I can haul in to actually complete the book. I haven't really worked that part of the plan out yet. The second part is, given that I make manuscript books, I want to take manuscript pages in that I'm either working on or I'll start fresh and talk about my process of how I start with handmade paper and build a book of, say, 10 folios, and then how that's possibly going to be assembled. So I'll be showing sketchbooks and plans for that, and giving people a sense, I hope, of what goes into these opulent objects. So
That'll be great. You also have a couple workshops you're
I
going to
have
be
a couple
doing
workshops.
in October. So let's talk about those really quickly. The first one is the Beginner's Guide to Book Arts, and that'll be on Saturday, October 13th from 1 to 3. Registration is required, and you can do that online at scld.org. And also on Saturday, October 27th, the Extraterrestrial book.
right.
And that will be from 1 to 3 o'clock. Open to adults and teens, and sounds like a couple exciting workshops. So I encourage
Well, the
everybody to
workshop-
check it out.
Sorry for interrupting. Yeah, the
That's okay.
workshop is going to be a really great form that I love, that's essentially a very small portable sketchbook. So it's something, I have literally piles of them in different places of the house. So when I'm leaving, I grab one or grab two, and if I'm meeting somebody in a restaurant, I'm always early, so I have something to do. And they're undated and unnumbered. They just kind of fill themselves up. And it's a really wonderful form for anyone who wants to either keep a tiny journal, just having a notebook in the pocket, or it can be elaborated in some ways that I will demonstrate in the workshop of how to make this thing into a little visual book. So it's a really cool thing, and it's it could be taught to very young people, but everybody that I work with as an adult just like, oh, can we do some more of those? And so we'll be doing a lot of those little books.
Oh, that's great. Very looking forward to that. We did a Q&A with you on our library blog on our website, and I was reading that, so I've cheated a little bit. Anyway, I was reading a little bit about your travels, that you had traveled to England, Italy, and Japan, and in the Q&A, you said to pick up what was missing from your education. What did you learn that was missing, or what did you feel that was missing that you went searching for?
Well, you know how you have these pivotal people in your lives that show up at exactly the right time? I have a whole string of them. And in graduate school, one of my professors, Ron Caraher, we met to talk about what I was working on. And after he looked at everything, he looked at my sketchbook and said, well, what you should be really doing, and he said this, I think, quite loosely, it wasn't really, it wasn't an order, you should be making these. You should be taking your drawings and turning them into books. And I know that what he meant was that I should be taking my drawings, organizing them, and publishing those in either a series. He wasn't exactly clear. It was almost an offhand remark, but it literally was, you could see the lights coming on. So he drives off. I go to the University of Washington bookstore and I buy my first bookbinding book.
Wow.
And I hold it home, and of course it was written in English, and it's a manual essentially for librarians and menders. There was no art in it. It's not about art, it's about just construction. But it's a little gem. It's a couple dollars, and it was the activator. It was a thing that said, this is really possible. Well, of course, being an English bookbinding book, none of the materials were available, and I would soon find out that you can't go downtown Spokane or downtown Seattle and buy almost anything in those days related to bookbinding. So I was having to figure out all sorts of substitutions, and it was peculiar. But I began to get good at it, and in the late 70s, I applied for an NEA grant and I got it. So that was the next leg of my education, was to go to England and learn how to be a bookbinder. And in the course of that, I went to Japan to learn some things about paper and secure some Japanese things. And Japan is just important to this whole process, so I had to go. Yeah. And Italy was kind of, I love Japanese food and Italian food, so I was so close to Italy. It's like, we have to go there. We have to go to some libraries. We need to talk to a few binders, but basically we need to go and eat.
Yes.
And so we took, I think, a month to do that out of the time. But when I got to England, I found 3 bookbinders that were all willing to teach me. One of them was very elderly, and she was just an amazing storyteller. She was born like 2 years before Queen Victoria died.
Oh my gosh.
And related to Victorian-style bookbinding. Another teacher was my mother's age, and then one of my teachers was my age. So I had this great span of ideas, techniques. All these people had studied with very important historical people, and well, shall we call them historical figures? People were big in that scene, and it was a really tremendous year.
Sounds fascinating.
It was just fascinating.
Fascinating. Your whole life sounds so fascinating. We have to take a quick break,
Okay.
but when we come back, let's talk about these wonderful things you have here, and maybe a little bit about the process. So
Sure.
we'll do that when we come back, and we'll be right back on Library Out Loud.
Hi, I'm Larry Myers, owner of River Ridge Hardware. Welcome to our garden center here on the corner of Garland and Driscoll. We have fresh plants that come in weekly from all of our local growers. We can make your garden look like our garden. Here at River Ridge, we've been here 30 years. We're your full-service neighborhood hardware store. This is our sprinkler aisle, where my knowledgeable staff will help you put together your sprinkler system so it will make your yard lush green for the spring and summer. This is River Ridge Hardware's rental center, where we provide a multitude of equipment for rent for the do-it-yourselfer. Next time you're working on your home or yard this spring and summer, stop by, say hi, and we'll help you get the project done.
See you tomorrow night, and thanks again for taking care of the painting.
I got this.
Bye.
Weekends are made for painting. Let the experts at Rada Paint take care of you.
Hi. This looks amazing.
Rada Paint, over 80 years of quality, tradition, and trust. Find it in every can.
Hello there, Internet. My name is Braden Magruder, and I'm just coming out of the Spokane Talks building, and I'm excited to bring to you guys a new announcement that I am going to be the new host of the Youth Spotlight program. Now, our old host, Colin, he's off to Texas Christian University to pursue a degree in theater and broadcasting, and you know what? That's great for him, but that's what I like to call adulting. And you know, I don't think that we have time for adulting with the Youth Spotlight program. What the Youth Spotlight program is here to do is to bring to you guys news, the greatest news of some of the most amazing people here throughout Spokane that are, just going in high school, maybe about to go into college, you know. These people are achieving life's dreams and they are so young. And I think that these are stories that you guys should know about. And I'm so excited to be bringing them to you. Now, I'm a Spokane native myself. I've been performing throughout Spokane in various different shows. I just closed the show of Music Man, and you know, I guess I like long walks on the beach, keeping my business attire, while also keeping my French fry socks on close at hand. You know, it's going to be a great year, and I'm so excited to be your guys' host. So tune into Youth Spotlight to watch me interview some of the most amazing people. Thank you and have a great day.
Hello and welcome back to Library Out Loud. I'm Jane Baker, along with artist and bookbinder Timothy Ely, who is our artist in residence for the month of October at the lab at North Spokane. Again, I want to mention we have a couple workshops with you coming up in October, and you'll be there on Wednesdays from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m., and people can kind of drop in, see what you're doing, ask you questions, and talk about the process. A great program to have artists into the library, and we appreciate you being available for people just to chat and ask you questions. I mean, what a better way to learn things than an open forum like that. Yeah. So speaking of process, let's talk about what you have here and what kind of process you go through to put any of these things together, and maybe even the equipment. Where do you want to start?
Where do I want to start? Well, when I build a book for myself, I'm usually starting with a concept of what do I want the book to be about. And so my books are about, since I'm a drawer primarily, are full of imagery.
Oh my gosh, that is beautiful.
This is a model for a much larger book that took 15 years to make. There are 160 drawings in this book.
Wow.
But the process is, once the drawings are made, then the book is sewn, and each piece of paper that I use is fairly thick, and the sewing goes almost, we're speaking generally here, through the fold, anchoring it to these supports. And in the difference between a bound book versus a case-bound book, which most contemporary machine-made books are, these devices, these sewing supports, either are laced into the boards somehow, or they're somehow attached so that these boards are not just glued to the first piece of paper in the book, as this one is, but this thing is actually held through the leather, the end papers, sewing thread, linings underneath this part. And when I started really falling in love with the idea of the medieval book, those things have this kind of massive robustness. They're very Zoftic, they are very heavy. Most medieval books, when held, exhibit this kind of weight. They kind of either are happy being opened or they want to close themselves up. And so I have a fondness for the medieval prayer book as a notion.
Oh my gosh.
Where you have something that basically you take a breath and you maybe, this one isn't clasped, but it would have these little clasps, and the clasp would open and you would open it up and you would exhale and pray. And it's just such a lovely moment.
Yes.
And as books became more industrialized, we began to detach ourselves from the idea of the sacred in favor of something that was more reader available, more subject driven, more many subject driven. So we kind of left the strict theology world, Bible's criticism, commentary, for things that were herbals, how-to books, masonry, carpentry, which we started getting when we hit printing.
Can I see that one?
Absolutely.
This is great. I want to kind of hold this up for the camera. Oh, it feels there's substance here. Very much substance. Yes, mass. Wow, this is really cool. That's nice. That is very nice. What else do you have here?
Well, and this is the one that I've only taken as far as sewing, so it would be very easy to take it apart and re-sew it. And it's just some paper, some samples that I was testing some inks on, and it happened to be the right size to do a little sewing model. So some of the B-roll footage that is here out there is of this book being sewn.
Oh, great.
And so these will be cut down and laced into boards or attached somehow. And there's a lot of ways to do that. And they're all, it's like being a Boy Scout, and you're building something with sticks and rope. And that's what we're doing here.
So how does it start? Where is your inspiration? Do you start with, oh, I want to do these drawings, and I want to make a book of these drawings, or
Yeah,
how?
I mean, that's in a sense it. I have always been attracted to, that's what I want to say, projections of a fertile imagination. So whether it's 1950s science fiction, the images of science, how science works, how environmental science works, how botany, biology, life sciences, psychology, and in this same library we were talking about earlier, Mrs. Trapp had long since retired, but I get along well with librarians. I got to really looking at atlases and realized that atlases were visual reference books. They were great carriers of information, but if I laid an atlas out for somebody or a world map, it's very easy to get a narrative going about, or conversation about, look, there's Dubai. I was there in 1984. Or, Germany's much smaller than I thought. My parents are from Germany. And then a story happens. And so, to circle back to the atlas became a way of dealing with landscape painting, working on landscapes from above rather than being embedded in them. And so for probably 35 years pretty straight, I worked on various kinds of atlases, but they could be psychological, they could be landforms, and they were never very accurate because that wasn't my job. Cartographers make great atlases, so I don't have to do that work, but I can be really inspired by their work. So everything from mapping a physical space, a landscape, the human body, a set of ideas. I started seeing all sorts of things that referenced back to the atlas form, and they're big books.
Yes.
So it brought in a book scale that was larger than this. This is very intimate, very portable, but an atlas kind of becomes formidable, and it has some mass to it.
Yeah.
It has projection to
Yes,
it. Yeah.
yes. Wow. So then these books, for example, this one, which is really beautiful. I'm almost afraid to touch it.
Oh, you should
so,
touch it.
I need to touch
Yeah.
it. Oh. For some reason, I want to say this is the kind of books that they're opening on Game of Thrones when they look at books like that. I kind of imagine this type of thing. So this is...
I have made props for movies, for
Is that right?
record album covers.
oh my gosh.
Andreas Vollenweider's album from the 1992 maybe, called The Book of Roses, has a book that I made that was quite large, and the book was after I built it, after I bound it, was cannibalized so we could put lights in it because it was, after all, a video and still photography prop, and so the book would light up from the inside, and the Goyer
that's
Club.
very cool.
It's very cool. Yeah. So the book got rather trashed, but I rebuilt the book, and it went to the library where the video for that promotion was shot.
Oh, that's
So
nice.
the book's still
Very
in the
neat.
world.
So now this is absolutely beautiful.
Thank you.
So is this the only one?
That's it.
This is it. One and only
I mean, as a
book like
as a tagline for people, I tell them I make the rarest books in the world.
this. Very rare.
And a lot. I'm not the only one. But when you only make one of something, that's it. There's only one copy. Of that book on the planet.
Wow.
And it could be dismantled. It could be reproduced. We've done that a few times. But for the most part, there is a quality of the dust in the pigments, the fact that the watercolors are made of dirt, million-year-old dirt, many millions of years old, so many of those colors will never fade. The paper has an opulence because it's mold made from France. It has everything is about touch. So
Yes.
you touch it, you read it, you feel it.
Yes.
There's something about an e-reader that you don't get that.
Yes.
You get something else,
You do.
but you don't get that.
You do. I enjoy e-readers. They're great for travel and those type of things, but there's nothing like what you hold in your hand like this.
And there's a sculptural quality that I like. So every book has, it's essentially a flattened cube. And so you've got all these edges to work on, plus each single page is another flattened cube. So there's a place for color or some other little dynamic to occur. Could be gold, could be metal. I mean, there's a nice little example of a gilded, a gold edge, gilded edge. And I'm told, I can't verify this, but at one time it was thought that if the three edges of a book were gilded, it helped make it fireproof.
Oh.
So I've never tested that.
Yeah. I wouldn't want to test that on any of these. So if somebody was interested in purchasing one of your books, what would they do? Where would they go?
I have rare book dealers that I work through. On my blog, there's a page called How to Get in Touch with Me to buy a book. I'm always interested in making books for people because I like that contact of discussing not really what your needs would be, because I usually show people what I'm working on and they go, that's fine, but I want information like birthdays and maybe GPS coordinates of where you live or a favorite spot that's significant, so I can begin to build those numerical relationships into the book. And those are usually so buried, so coded, so embedded in the deep paper process that you might not even know they're there, but it's a link to you. So we would take stuff, and I probably request some dirt from your garden, or if you've made a trip abroad, to make sure you shake your boots out at night onto a piece of paper and save that. I just got a tiny amount of soil from Mongolia.
Wow.
Don't have any Mongolian soil, so this is pretty cool.
Yeah, very cool. Oh, this is very exciting stuff. What a great idea for very personal.
So it's biblio voodoo.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I don't think I've gotten to use those terms together before. So.
I don't think I did until just now. Yeah.
That's great. Well, Tim, I want to wrap up here real quickly by again saying you're up at the lab at the North Spokane Library through the month of October, Wednesdays from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. And you'll be doing 2 workshops, the Beginner's Guide to Book Arts and the Extraterrestrial Book. And you can register for either or both of those programs at scld.org. And very exciting. I'm so glad that you'll be up there, and what a wonderful gift that you bring to the community by doing this. So again, thank you, and we'll see you next time. Oh, I do want to say quickly that we also have a blog entry of Q&A with you on our website. So I encourage people to go there and read more about what your process is and what they can learn. So again, thank you for being here, and we will see you next time on Library Out Loud.
Library Out Loud is produced in Spokane, Washington by SpokaneTalksOnline.com, which is solely responsible for its content. Ask a question, recommend a guest, and hear this program again online anytime at SpokaneTalksOnline.com. Library Out Loud is brought to you by the Spokane County Library District and STCU. Go visit and explore your local library today.